The street lay in the amber hush of evening, the dust catching light like embers drifting through air gone soft with heat. A dog barked once, then went quiet, and the town's heartbeat slowed into the clatter of boots on wooden planks and the muffled laughter leaking from the saloon. Jessamine Crowe stood just outside those batwing doors, her hands knotted in front of her, her bonnet tugged low as if it might shield her from eyes that were already cutting her down. She could hear them, the whispers, slipping between coughs and chuckles. Trash. No good Crow girl. Not fit to sew a hem, not fit to sit in a pew. Her throat felt raw though she hadn't spoken a word. She turned away from the swinging lantern light, seeking the shadows of the alley. It smelled of horses, damp earth, and the faint sour of whiskey spilled too long ago. There she pressed her back against the wall and let her shoulders shake. Tears came hot, though she bit them down, embarrassed even of grief. She thought of her mother's voice, soft as quilt batting, whispering that dignity was the only inheritance worth keeping. But dignity felt like a coin spent too often, worn smooth until nothing of value remained. She had gone door to door that day, hands open, head bowed, offering to scrub floors, to mend shirts, to stitch torn seams. Everywhere doors shut. Sometimes with a sneer, sometimes with silence, which hurt worse. At the general store, Mrs. Harker had let her words fall like stones. Crow girl, best move along. Your kind only brings ruin. A man buying nails chuckled at that, and Jessamine had felt the laugh dig into her ribs. By the time she reached the churchyard, she could see women whispering to one another, glances darting sharp as pins. No place here for her. No seat at table, no roof to rest beneath. Now in the alley she sank onto her knees, dirt biting into her skirt. They call me trash, she murmured into her palms. The words seemed to hang there, fragile, before being swallowed by the creak of wagons and the whistle of wind through the shutters. A shadow fell over her but did not press in. She looked up, startled, to see a man standing near the mouth of the alley. He did not stare as others did. He stood tall, shoulders weathered by a life in the wild, his coat patched but clean, his boots worn by long trails. He had a quiet about him, the sort that drew attention even when he wished it wouldn't. Folks had noticed him earlier that day, moving through town like a boulder rolling in a river, slow, steady, impossible to ignore. Boone Thatcher, they whispered, though none knew much about him beyond the fact he lived alone in the high country. Jessamine thought he might pass on, but he lingered. Not moving closer, not demanding, only holding her in his gaze as though to say he had heard her words and would not mock them. She looked away, ashamed of her tears. He shifted, and she saw his hands full with a sack of flour, heavy as stone. He set it down near the general store, tipped his hat to an old woman struggling with her basket, lifted it for her without a word. Small gestures, but they carried more weight than the boasting of half the men in town. Boone Thatcher, the man the town treated with suspicion but not cruelty, strange was better than ruined. When his errands were done he came back to the alley. He did not kneel, did not crowd her. He only reached into his coat and drew out a folded handkerchief, rough but clean, and held it out. She stared at it, trembling. Finally she took it, pressing it to her eyes. The silence stretched, but it was not empty. It was patient, like pine woods holding their breath. You hungry? His voice was low, like gravel smoothed by years of rivers. She hesitated, unsure if answering might open her to ridicule again. But his face held no sneer. She nodded once. He didn't move right away. Instead, he leaned against the wall opposite, arms crossed as if to give her time. Place I stay. Cabin up in the hills. Ain't much, but it's mine. You can come if you've got no roof of your own. Her heart jolted. She wanted to believe him, but she heard already how the town would twist it. Run off with the mountain man. Prove them right, didn't she? Yet the thought of another night alone in the shed behind the blacksmith's, hungry, shivering, waiting for dawn just to begin begging again, her stomach turned at it. She studied him, the lines in his face carved by wind and solitude. He was not a man who talked much, not one who promised sweet things. And maybe that was what made her trust him. Why? Her voice cracked like dry wood. He shrugged, eyes steady. Because no one deserves to be left like that. The lantern outside the saloon sputtered and went out, leaving the alley dim. Jessamine clutched the handkerchief, her chest tight. She rose slowly, her skirts catching on splinters, her knees aching. For a moment she swayed, dizzy with the weight of choice. Behind her, the town murmured still, always watching, always ready to name her shame. Before her, Boone waited, saying nothing, only watching her with the same steady patience. At last she stepped forward, the sound of her boots on the dirt louder than the pounding of her heart. She did not take his hand, but she walked past him, out toward the fading light. He fell in beside her, silent. His horse nickered from the hitching post. Boone untied the reins, and Jessamine laid her palm on the animal's neck, surprised at the warmth there. They left the town behind without farewell. The air cooled as dusk deepened, stars just beginning to show. Jessamine did not look back. She knew what would be waiting in those windows. Women's lips pursed, men's smirks hidden in their mustaches. She let them have their stories. The dust of the road rose around her boots, carrying her away from the alleys, the whispers, the endless weight of names she never chose. Boone walked at her side, guiding the horse, saying nothing. It was enough. The road wound upward, away from the dust of town into country that smelled of pine and damp earth. The stars spread wider as the night deepened, their silver fire scattering across the black. Jessamine pulled her shawl tighter, her steps heavy but her heart strangely light, as if each mile peeled away a layer of shame she had carried too long. Boone led in silence, the steady clip of his boots and the soft snort of the horse making a rhythm she began to trust. When they reached his cabin, the moon hung high, its light draping the world in quiet silver. The place stood small but solid, logs stacked with care, smoke curling faint from the chimney though no fire burned now. Around it stretched the dark shoulders of mountains, brooding and kind all at once. Jessamine had never seen such stillness. No windows watching, no whispers following. Just the sharp cry of an owl and the wind moving through pine needles like a hymn. Boone lit a lamp and pushed the door open, stepping aside for her. The inside smelled of wood smoke and leather, of a life lived in solitude but not in squalor. A cot against one wall, shelves lined with jars of dried beans, tools hanging neat and ready. A single chair carved by hand. Jessamine hovered at the threshold, afraid to intrude, but he gave a slight nod that said plainly, "This is yours now too." He set down his gear and left her to explore, moving about with the ease of a man who does not need to fill silence with words. She touched the edge of the table, the smooth handle of a pan, the quilt folded at the end of the cot. Each thing here seemed honest. Nothing fancy, nothing borrowed. She thought of the houses in town where curtains and silver candlesticks hid coldness beneath. Here there was only truth. That night she lay on a pallet he'd spread by the fire. The flames whispered, shadows danced across the beams, and for the first time in months she slept without dreaming of eyes watching her. Days turned into a rhythm. Boone showed her the path to the creek where water ran clear and cold. He taught her how to split kindling, slow and steady, letting the axe fall with the weight of her body rather than strength she did not have. Her palms blistered and stung, but he showed her how to wrap cloth around them, and she bore it without complaint. In return she mended his shirts, the needle flying with a skill her mother had taught her. When she hummed as she worked, Boone would sometimes pause, listening without letting on. They spoke little, but in their silences something grew. When she stumbled carrying wood, he steadied her with one hand and let go the moment she regained balance, giving her back her dignity. When he returned from hunting with a rabbit, she cooked it into stew, and the look he gave her over that first shared meal was not gratitude alone but recognition, that she was no burden here. Rain came one afternoon, hard and relentless, drumming the roof like 1,000 tiny fists. Jessamine sat by the fire sewing while Boone sharpened his knife. For a long time neither spoke. Then, softly, she said, "Do you ever miss town?" His whetstone paused, then moved again. "Town never missed me," he said. She nodded, feeling the truth of it settle deep in her chest. The world outside their valley did not stay quiet. One morning hoofbeats sounded on the trail. 2 men from town rode up, their faces carrying the smugness she knew too well. Jedediah Knox was among them, his eyes glinting as they fell on her. "Well, if it ain't the Crow girl." "Thought so. Run off with the hermit. Just as we said." Her stomach twisted, shame rising hot. But Boone stepped onto the porch, his stance easy but unyielding. "You've said enough," he told them, voice calm. Knox spat in the dirt. "She'll drag you down same as her kin. Best send her packing." Boone's gaze didn't flicker. "This is my land. My cabin. My say." The men lingered a moment, muttering, then turned their horses and rode off, laughter trailing behind them like smoke. Jessamine's knees shook. She sank onto the step, burying her face in her hands. "I've ruined you," she whispered. Boone crouched beside her. His hand did not touch, but his words held weight. "What they say ain't who you are." She lifted her head. His eyes were steady as stone, and for the first time she let herself believe he meant it. Weeks passed, and the valley drew her into itself. She learned the paths where berries grew, how to set snares, how to mend a fence post. Boone worked beside her, his silence no longer a wall but a space where she could breathe. She began to stand straighter, her laughter, rare and quiet, slipping out at odd moments, surprising them both. Then came the storm. It rolled in fierce and sudden, clouds black as coal, wind tearing branches from trees. Boone had gone out to chop wood, and when he did not return, worry gnawed at her. She wrapped herself in a shawl and pushed through the rain, calling his name. She found him sprawled near the chopping block, a tree limb fallen and struck his leg. Blood mixed with mud, his axe lying half buried. Panic surged, but she forced it down. She tugged at his arm, dragging him inch by inch toward the cabin. Her muscles screamed, her lungs burned, but she did not stop. At last she got him inside, soaked to the bone. His face was pale, eyes half-lidded. She washed the wound with trembling hands, bound it as best she could. Then she saw the fire had gone out. The cabin was cold, rain beating against the shutters, the world outside a howling void. If the fire stayed dead, so would they. She took up the hatchet with raw palms and stumbled outside. The rain bit her skin, the wood slippery under her grip. She swung until her arms gave out, splitting small pieces. She carried them back, teeth chattering, and worked to coax flame from spark. Her hands bled, her breath came ragged, but at last the kindling caught. Fire leapt up, licking orange into the dark. She sat back, tears mingling with sweat, watching the flames take hold. In that moment, reflected in the firelight, she did not see the girl the town had named Trash. She saw a woman who had pulled life out of storm and darkness. Boone stirred, his voice hoarse. "You kept us warm." Her throat closed with something that was not shame but fierce pride. "We kept us warm," she whispered back. The storm raged through the night, but inside the fire held. Boone slept, his breathing steadier, while Jessamine sat awake, watching the flames and feeling something shift within her. She was no longer begging for scraps of dignity. She had found it herself, in the crack of wood under her hands, in the stubborn fire that refused to die. When dawn came, the storm had blown itself out. The valley gleamed under a sky washed clean, the mountains sharp against the light. Jessamine stepped outside, the wet earth smelling of renewal, the air cool and sweet. She felt taller somehow, her shoulders no longer bowed. Boone joined her, leaning on a crutch he had fashioned. He said nothing, only stood beside her, the two of them facing the wide morning. No promises were spoken, no grand vows made. But in their silence was a bond stronger than gossip, stronger than shame. She thought of the town and its whispers, how small they seemed now compared to this wide, endless sky. "And if you had been there, standing at the edge of that clearing with her, you might have seen what I saw, the moment a woman shed the name others had forced upon her and stood in her own. You might have felt the truth in your own chest, that the world will always try to carve you down with names and judgments, but the earth knows only what you endure. The fire knows only that you burn. The sky asks only that you rise." And so Jessamine Crowe, once called Trash, lifted her face to the morning, and for the first time she did not flinch.